Your Bibles to Matthew chapter 5. Matthew chapter 5. And in your book, page 57. Page 57. On page 57 in chapter 21, Sermon on the Mount concerning true righteousness. We're getting ready to do some teaching now into Galilee, and the Gospel of Matthew contains Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, which gives a good view of what Jesus emphasized earlier in his Galilean ministry. Many people have started coming to Jesus to be taught and to be healed. On one occasion, he went up on a hillside and sat down. His closest disciples came to him, as well as others, and he taught them all. He began his message by announcing or pronouncing a blessing upon a very unlikely group of people. He said that the poor in spirit was blessed, as well as those that mourn, and he said that the meek and those that hunger and thirst for righteousness was blessed. In Matthew chapter 5, let's read the entire chapter of the Beatitudes. Okay, it's a very long reading, but it's we all have and this is just so familiar to the attitude. So this will not take us by surprise, nor anything in here. So let's do that. Let's break it down. And let's just give 10. Well, let's just give an account for reading. Let's just do 1 through 10, and then let's do 11 through 16, 17 through 20, 21 through 26, and 27 through 32, 33 through 42, and 43 through 48. Okay, so each account we'll read that segment.
That's in the Bible? Yes, Matthew chapter 5.
Matthew chapter 5. In the Bible, Matthew chapter 5. And we're going to do all 48 verses.
After righteousness said should be heard. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall go the kingdom of God. Blessed are they which persecute the righteous, safe for their kingdom of God.
Go to the next one.
Okay, so somebody start reading in verse 11.
Blessed are you when they rival and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you falsely for my name's sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its flavor, how shall it be seasoned? It is then good for nothing but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. You are the light of the world. A city is set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do they light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven.
Okay, 17 to 20, someone?
Do not think that I came to destroy the law or the prophets. I did not come to destroy but to fulfill it. For surely I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away. One joint or one little will by no means pass from the law till all is fulfilled. Whoever therefore breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches men so shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does not teach them, he shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I say to you that unless you righteousness, for I say to you that unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven.
Okay, Psalm 121 to 26.
Ye have heard that it was said by them of old time, Thou shalt not kill, and whosoever shall kill shall be in danger of the judgment. But I say unto you, that whoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment. And whosoever shall say to his brother, Raka, shall be in danger of the council. But whosoever shall say, Thou fool, shall be in danger of hellfire. Therefore, if you bring thy gift to the altar, and there remember that your brother hath aught against thee, has nothing against thee, leave there thy gift before the altar, and go thy way. First be reconciled to thy brother, and then come and offer thy gift. Agree with thine adversary quickly, while thou art in the way with him, lest at any time the adversary deliver thee to the judge, and the judge deliver thee to the officer, and thou be cast into prison. Verily I say unto you, thou shalt by no means come out thence till thou hast paid the utmost farthing.
Okay. Next reading, 27 to 32.
You have heard that it was said, You shall not commit adultery. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. It has been said, anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. But I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, makes her the victim of adultery, and anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery.
Okay, next reading.
Again, ye have heard that it hath been said by them of old time, Thou shalt not forswear thyself, but shalt perform unto the Lord thine oath. But I say unto you, swear not at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by earth, for it is his footstool, neither by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. Neither shalt thou swear by the head, because thou canst not make one hair white or black. But let your communication be yea, yea, nay, nay, for whatsoever is more than these cometh of evil. Ye have heard that it has been said, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you, that ye visit not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if any man will sue thee at the law, and take away the coat, let him have thy cloak also. And whosoever shall compel thee to go a mile, go with him twain. Give to him that asketh thee, and from him that will borrow of thee, turn not thou away. Ye have heard that it hath been said, Thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thy enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemy, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you, that ye may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. For he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust. For if ye love them which love you, what reward have ye? Do not even the publicans the same? And if ye salute your brethren only, what do you more than others? Do not even the publicans so? By ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect.
Okay, thank you. All right, in the book itself, Brother Walker is going to stick straight to the Beatitudes, make a couple of comments as we go page to page. Okay, so it really going to do you some good if you just refresh yourself with the Beatitudes. That's the reason why I had us read the whole thing, so we can just get it back in our minds again of common teaching to common people and what had already happened to some of the teaching that was already going on. So I'm going to reread the second paragraph on page 57. He said, he began his message by announcing or pronouncing a blessing upon a very unlikely group of people. He said that the poor in spirit were blessed, as well as those that mourn. And he said that the meek and those that hunger and thirst for righteousness was blessed. He also announced or pronounced a blessing upon the merciful, the pure in heart, the peacemakers, and those that are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Matthew 5:3-11. Such people were not considered to be blessed in those days, nor are they considered to be blessed today. Why do you think Jesus talked like this to this group of people in this setting?
I think he spoke that way to give them hope. And
Okay.
because they were not, they were the ones that are really cast down, that, people didn't pay that much attention to being persecuted or being downtrodden or being meek or taken advantage of, or I just think he came to give them hope. And so the message to them had to be good news. And it allowed them to continue to endure.
Okay. Okay, anyone else?
But these were his disciples. So these would be the people that will carry on the ministry and be the foundational pieces of the church. So he's giving them the tools to change their thinking. If you can change somebody's thinking, it can change their approach, right? Like he needed their approach to change in order to start a church that would be different than a nation, right? These people were used to being a nation. He needed them to be a church, but they didn't know what a church was. And all of the things that they were hearing and doing, they were so consumed for hundreds of years on the physical, they missed the spiritual applications of the law altogether. So what he did was, first he encouraged them spiritually, right? He mentioned all these things, blessed from a spiritual, to get their mind to hear him spiritually. Then he started saying, you heard about these things, but you really got to do it this way, right? Like it's training. He's basically grabbing these people and training their minds to think like he would need them to think in order for them to act like he's going to need them to act. But in order to act that way, he has to get them to think in a new way. And I think that that's the thing that jumped out to me when we just read this in this type of setting, because he could have started this sermon anywhere, but he started saying, blessed are these people who are emotionally and spiritually not well, right? Blessed are those people first. And that to me is, that means everyone. I'm assuming you're going to tell me something, but I hear something else. Now you have my undivided attention. Then you start telling me all these things I heard already in the law, but you're telling me go further, right? Like, don't kill. Everyone knows that, but don't even hate, or you don't do this, but don't even that. So to me, it's the laying the groundwork for changing their mind.
Anyone else? The Beatitudes is really the Psalms of the gospel. If you go back to the Psalms, that is the Psalms of the Old Testament. One is the most read collection of writings and work in the Old Testament. The Beatitudes is that of the gospel. More people go to the Beatitudes for comfort and hope and direction than any other book in the Bible. They generally start there when they're down and out. When you're in the hospital, things are not going well, chronic illnesses, things of that nature, people generally revert back to the Beatitudes. Jesus has just come off a series of healing people and doing great things. And then he goes up and, he grabs his closest friends, the Bible says, and some folks too. And he goes up on this hillside to make it audible. And he started teaching in this way. And common people are around him wanting to know the very mind of God. What are you talking about? These things are resonating with people. And the way he started off the Beatitudes, he got everyone's attention. And everybody in that crowd and in that group understood what he was talking about. And it was an encouragement. And right now, that ministry, he's looking forward in that ministry. And he's looking at some things that's going to benefit these folks later on. He's going to tighten things up as he goes through his Galilean ministry and his visits. And after that, he's going to fix things up. And people will remember this Sermon on the Mount after that resurrection. When folks come together as a church, come together as a body of people, come together in Christianity, they're going to remember Jesus' teachings. Remember, this group of folks right here, most people, if they're not well up in age, is going to remember his teachings when they hear it again coming from the disciples. So think about that. Think about what these Beatitudes mean, what it means as we go through them, and how Brother Walker basically, set them up in this order as we read it down. On page 58, Jesus explained that their blessedness reside in the reward they would get. How do you think that matters in the very first Beatitude? If you're poor in spirit, what are you thinking about when Jesus is talking about this very subject? Just the first line, not the second line. Blessed are the poor in spirit. What are you thinking about if you're down and out spiritually? Generally, when people start talking, you miss all of what they're saying. Because when they start talking and it resonates with you, where do your mind go? It takes off, right? It takes off. He's the master. He's the teacher. And he's starting off with blessed are those who are poor in spirit. Why? What benefit does it give them now being poor in spirit? What does the very next line say? Well, theirs is the kingdom of what? God. You have hope. Right off the bat, I'm seeing hope for me. Right there, Jesus is starting with hope. And there are a lot of people who are down and out, a lot of people who don't have hope, who just live hopelessness lives. Every single day they get up, they have no direction. And Jesus is teaching on a hillside to people who sat right down there at the bottom of that hill, listening to what he was saying, pondering on things that he was saying. And he's telling them that they're blessed. God is trying to resonate with his people. God is trying to start right at the very bottom of the ladder and work his way up. That's what God is trying to do right now in these teaching. In this Galilean ministry, God is trying to get people to identify with him. Don't worry about it. Tune in. That's basically what Jesus is saying to people. Tune in. Any comments on that one?
I'll say one thing is the more that I think of this from where he's about to expound is even some people in his audience, based on what they believe, remember you had Pharisees, Sadducees, lawyers, scribes, some of them didn't even believe in heaven. So some of them were so physically minded, they didn't even think there is anything past this life that we have now, right? So like to me, this groundwork is so important because maybe I take it for granted because I only know church. I didn't come from a synagogue setting, but from studying this, these are a lot of physical things, right? Physical holidays, physical sacrifices, physical cities I have to go to, physical food I got to eat, physical way I have to dress, physical people I can't intermarry with, like all these physical things. But his first thing is talking about spiritual things, right? Like I could see his audience being extremely confused. Now, for us, we only try to put our mind into spiritual things. Like on the way here, we try to get our mind into spiritual things. So this doesn't hit me the same way. I feel like his audience, this would have hit them because their religion is so physical and God is spirit. So much so that they didn't believe spirit could ever be in flesh. That's why the Gnostics never believed Jesus could be real. So for him to skip the physical, those were the miracles, and just start talking about blessed are the poor in spirit and then go down this spiritual list, it just, to me, I could imagine some people who this would have been extremely groundbreaking for them to hear in a sermon because their religious setting was going to a synagogue, having a sacrifice, and hearing words from the law, right? They weren't hearing stories. Like, we read everything in the Old Testament as a lesson for us, but the law is very much the Torah, right? The first 5 books. Imagine if all worship service is when we came here, you just start reading Deuteronomy. Like that wouldn't really, right? That wouldn't really make you be a better person, kind of, because it's so rules based. You see what I'm saying? This sermon has nothing to do with just the physical rules. He's talking about some spiritual aspect that's so new to them in their hearing. This had to be so captivating to the people who are in his audience.
And I think to that point, the scriptures that in the beginning part of Matthew chapter 5, it's talking about your personal emotional condition. And really what the law was missing was that type of language. So it was very much so built on external behaviors and not internal mindsets or a heart prostrate. So when Jesus is talking about being merciful, like, how do you practice that? That, like, the law was about the practice, and I feel like the New Testament is more taking that practice and understanding the theory of what God was trying to do. And that's a hard thing. I think that's why even in modern day Christianity, most people default back into legalism because it's easier. So most Christians, like how many people in this room think about being merciful? But people tell you what not to wear, don't drink, don't go here, don't. Those are all activities and behaviors. But Jesus is talking about the becoming. And in order to become, you have to possess a mindset and a spirit. And that's really hard. So, I mean, I'm sure they were confounded, but just to apply it to us, I think a lot of times we're confounded on, like, what does that actually mean? Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Some people don't get mercy because they're not merciful. Like, that's a spiritual law. But, like, how am I applying that to my life? I mean, that's a hard thing.
When you're trying to, again, it's unfortunate when we study like this that we are going to struggle with the way the study is set up. In between the Old Testament and the New Testament, God was silent. Didn't talk, right? Jesus is born. He comes along during time when religion is so fragmented and certain things are already set up and certain things are being done every single day. Leadership, the way they taught in the synagogue and in the temple was just not resonating with people. So people, after a while, and remember, his audience is under persecution, meaning that there is another government governing them. They go to the to worship, and they get nothing but a teaching that is over their head. It has no substance at all. They go there with problems. And when you get there, you have to be legalistic. You have to bring something. You have to take a number. And if someone want to talk to you, they do. If they don't, they usher you out. You have a system that is built up that when you walk into the door, it is a class system. You can't get anything from this leadership teaching. So when you walk away, even if you want to be religious, when you walk away from that Pharisee, Sadducee, teachers, lawyers, all that debating and stuff that goes on about the word itself, the law itself, you leave there, you get no instructions at all. So a lot of people just didn't go. They just did it because it was ritual to do. They did it because they had to do it. But they got nothing. When you are in need, where do you go? Well, you should go here. But what if here doesn't make sense? You see what I'm saying? Most of the time, we as ministers talk over people's heads. You know, there are things that you come in and that we have done all week long. We come to Sunday, we want to worship God and give him a true spirit, but a lot of us are already broken before we even get there. And we have issues. And then it's the me effect. Everybody's always looking at me. Me. You know, and then you sit down, and depending on what your mindset is, you very well sometimes just can't keep it all in. And I mean, he goes through a series of blessedness that before he leaves this subject, he tells them in verse 11, blessed are you when they revile and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you falsely for my name's sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. He's the only one talking like that. Ain't nobody else talking like that. But Jesus, newsflash, that's me. That's me right now. I'm not measuring up. I'm being persecuted right now. And now you're telling me to be what? Exceedingly glad? You're telling me now I have hope and my hope is in heaven? Well, you're the only one talking like that. What if I'm under the Sadducee teaching? Well, we don't believe in the afterlife. So to Ellis's point, now I'm confused. If I'm under the Pharisee teaching, then I'm getting a little bit of Moses, I'm getting a little bit of Elijah, I'm getting a little bit of the law. It's more oral than it is being taught. And where am I? What is my spiritual state of mind? Some people at this particular time in Jesus' ministry didn't even ask those questions anymore. Because you know what? They didn't care. They had lost hope. They paid their taxes to Rome. They paid their taxes to the temple. And they went on every day about their everyday lives, working as hard as they can, making ends meet, and going home. That was his crowd. Ellis?
One thing I'll say is, like, in public speaking, they teach you to do an intro, a body, and a conclusion. You're supposed to say what you're going to say in the beginning. That's this chapter. he ends it in the last verse saying, what? You should be perfect like your Father in heaven is perfect. These first several verses, these are God truths. The 10 Commandments are not God things, meaning God don't struggle with those 10 things. Those are human things. The law are human things. God don't wear clothes. God don't eat. See, those are human things. Those were all human things. That's why he's saying, you heard not to kill, but you have to not hate. Why? Because love is a God thing, right? Like God is mercy is all in Psalms. In order for you to be a Christian, you don't know what a Christian is yet. You have to start learning God things. That's why Emmanuel is so important to me, because Jesus is God with us, right? They don't know anything about who God is at this point in human history. They only know the law. The law is human related. It's not about you being more like God. It's just a shadow. It's just in order for you to love, you got to not kill. Learn that for some hundreds of years first. Once you learn that, then I'm going to come and teach you how to love. But first, you got to learn not to kill. So he's coming to them much like we're in a time frame now. People are religious and believe, but they don't think their belief should impact their lifestyle. These people were Jewish and believed in God and went and did temple things. But to me, it's not a worship service like we think. A worship service we talking about is being involved in honoring God. These things they did were just belief system, like family heritage things, right? Like you do things on Thanksgiving and Christmas and 4th of July that millions of families have been doing, right? It don't impact, 4th of July don't impact me as a lifestyle, right? Like that's just American things that we do. That's to me what they were doing. They were just doing physical things. Jesus is talking about lifestyle things. And to me, that's what church should be telling people, right? A lot of congregations and denominations tell you physical things. But when you start talking about lifestyle things, you're asking people to come to worship service with problems, but to leave with the mindset to work on their problems with the tools that can help them. That's where you lose some people, right? Some people are not willing to go home and do work. People don't like doing homework at school, so you know they don't want to do homework in church. But he's telling them, in order for you to be my follower, in some of your cases, you are going to have to throw out everything you think and believe and try a completely new way. You think, oh, don't commit adultery means this. You've been taught this for hundreds of years. I'm telling you, it really means a completely different way. You thought if people were broken emotionally to cast them out of society. I'm telling you, those are the people that are going to be elevated. Like, think about it. People probably left this thinking, what is he talking about? Because he's changing everything about their belief system as Jewish culture and Jewish religion. But as Bible students, the thing that I see, he's getting them to think more like God. In order for you to be perfect like God in heaven is perfect, you got to first be merciful. You got to love. You got to be caring. These are things that as church, we know these words. I don't think they knew these words like that. I don't think they walked around thinking, I need to be friendly, loving. These are Christ attributes. You see what I'm trying to say? These are not legal attributes, right? That's what's wrong with this country now. You're talking about, people are arguing about a document and the application of that document. Application takes emotion, but a document don't have emotion, right? The law doesn't have emotion. The law just have do's and don'ts. They missed the emotion because, remember, they didn't want to interact with God. They told Moses to go in between. Jesus is saying there is no more in between. I'm tearing the veil down. From now on, you all individually have to act the way that God would want you to act, but that's going to take work on your part. So let me help you. First, you have to learn how we think. Here are some ways that we act naturally. You're going to have to start acting. Mercifully is a natural attribute of God. Most people, that's not natural. Some of us, it's natural. But others of us will have to read that verse tonight and go home and gonna have to actively try to be more merciful. This list is so much personal homework. I could see some people just saying, I'm good. I just call me when the mirror comes. Because even me, there's things in this list that it's just not natural for me to think like this, right? A peacemaker. Some of us are naturally peacemakers. Other people are naturally violent. You can't be violent. See my point? So now you saying, do you want to be like Christ? Well, yeah, I want to get to heaven. Well, if you are violent, look how much more work you're going to have. This sounds like work. This don't sound like fun. This sounds like the law, to Erica's point, the law is achievable in my mind because I just sin, then I go somewhere and kill something else, and God forgive me. This is sounding like you want me to change who I am. This sounds too much like work. I can see why some people said these are hard sayings. Who could believe this? Because he's taking it to a level conceptually that they never experienced.
I mean, when you look at this, look at what Jesus is up against when he's standing up. He's look at his audience. Look at his audience. As a public speaker, where do you start? Remember, he knows everything. He knows everything about people. He cannot address just one thing. And again, remember what's going on in people's lives. Okay? I'm being told what to do by a government that is not my people. Think about that. I think sometimes, like I said, we get too far ahead on just conceptual teaching and what he was up against. I'm only going to take Paul for example. I'm only going to change if there is something to change too. If everybody around me is thinking one thing, then that's going to dictate my attitude and how I function. If I'm in a fishing community, I'm going to act like that community. I'm not interacting with another community. If I'm a violent person, if I'm Barabbas, I'm only hanging around people like that. People who are violent, people who are criminal, people who engage in criminal activity, they hang around people like that. You know what I'm saying? So when Jesus comes up with this, hey, this is the mind of God, well, okay, but I'm going back across to East Jerusalem. That's where I'm from. And in East Jerusalem, we don't think like that. You sound good, you make a lot of sense. But my surroundings don't dictate me changing my behavior because my mind, soul, and spirit only function a different way. Donna?
Yeah, what I like about these first few verses is that really Jesus is pronouncing blessings on them. So think about it. He starts each one of these scriptures here from 3 through 10, blessing them. He is saying that, so whoever this is, blessed are the poor in spirit. I mean, can you imagine that? And many of these people have heard Jesus in the past, but to have the Messiah say, blessed, right, are those who are, so whatever category you fall into, yes, this is a heart condition. Most of this is a heart condition. The law, very easy, checklist, and then you sacrifice and you're good, and whether you atone once a year or whenever you go to the temple. But this is something that you have to live by. But the good news is, but there's a promise here too, right? There's a promise about the kingdom in 11. So right away, there's a pattern that's set for you, right? If you do these things, right? If you are poor in spirit, guess what's going to happen? There's just the kingdom of heaven. So everyone should be trying to achieve these things. Is it easy? No, it's not. But to me, when I look at it, I look at the good news first, that there's been a blessing that's pronounced where God has found favor in individuals that have these attributes.
Verse 23 says, and Jesus went about all Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the gospel of the kingdom and healing all kinds of sicknesses and all kinds of diseases among the people. So Jesus goes to church, basically he goes to the synagogue where their place of worship is. Let me put it that way so we don't get the two mixed up. And he goes to the people and he's doing all this healing. Remember, he goes into the synagogue. If he does anything on the Sabbath, they jump on him for that. Okay, but he's going to the people. Okay, so he does what? Heal all kinds of sickness and all kinds of diseases among the people. Then his fame went out throughout all Syria, and they brought to him all sick people who were afflicted with various diseases, torments, and those who were demon-possessed, epileptics, paralytics, and he healed them. Great multitudes followed him from Galilee, from Decapolis, Jerusalem, Judea, and beyond the Jordan. See, I don't think sitting here you understand what that means. I don't think you understand what was following him when he moved. When Jesus moved about, people brought people to him. And what followed him, he goes then into the Beatitudes. Because now that this is being fixed, this is being fixed, this is being fixed, this got to be fixed in order for you to get to know God. Because if I don't fix this, all the fixing that I did to the exterior, you're just going to go about your own life. And then you're going to get caught up in the environment in which you're going back to. You see? Because the poor in spirit, those people that he has just helped physically, need their mind changed. Their mind is not going to be changed by this. Because this is not giving them what Jesus just said to them in Matthew chapter 5. The Pharisees will not let this kind of teaching happen in their temple. So right away, he has to change things. He has to, wait a minute, stop. And look at, and when I say change how he's doing things to teach this, look at the numbers that he's talking to. Don't think that he's just talking to 15 people in a room. When you up on a hillside, you got that many people following you, you now have to address what people are going to do after Matthew chapter 5. After you done healed them. Now you did what God told you to do. Now you got to show them God's heart. And some people are not going to want to hear that because they got what they want from Jesus. They came from Syria. They came from Decapolis. They came from near and far. They got what they wanted. That's a game changer in their life. Now he's asking them to be a peacemaker. Well, I have the ability now to go up to somebody who spit at me instead of putting money in a cup. My attitude toward that person when I see him again has to change. You used to kick me off. You used to tell me to take my mat and get out from in front of your door. That was me. My attitude toward doing something kind for somebody else has to change now. That's a radical teaching that Jesus is up against. I gave you what you needed. I gave what God told me to give you. Now God wants something back. And this is a radical teaching right now at this particular time in his ministry with this kind of people that have gotten results. And this is not applicable to them. They're getting this on the street. He can't teach this inside the synagogue. What do they do to him when he go in the synagogue talking something contrary to the law? They what? Ask him to leave. Because he's not being Pharisaic. So he goes out on the street. They're waiting on him to come outside the synagogue. They're waiting for Jesus. Deb?
Yes, radical issue. Radical. I like that word. Radical. You know, before Jesus opened this chapter, the people at the time, they were all were under the Exodus chapter 20. The same Exodus chapter 20, the same God spoke those to people came from the slavery, from the Egypt. And those are the people who came this all the way at this bottom. And now they are modernists at the time. They are the modernists. They're all the ancestors, their grandfather, they all died. They all forget. but the rules and regular still exist. The same law when exist Exodus chapter 20. You should not do this and that. All the strong word. And Jesus said this. Definitely that's radical because this is very way easy. That's why Jesus said, my yoke is easy, right? That means the same God bringing those first one and the same God bringing new one, which is Hebrew chapter 10. And I feel that way. People did not feel that way, which is we are feeling today. Those people are were know that chapter 20, Exodus chapter 20, because they just knew those laws. And what the Jesus said that was so different than way that back then. So that's why it's so different. But my understanding is this is the Jesus Christ bringing his new principle. It's the fundamental of Jesus Christ, just like a constitution, and the United States Constitution. The one, the second is the amendment. You can bear the arm. Third is you can do this. Fourth is this. So and so. The same like this one. Jesus giving you very easy life and given us. You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. You are this. You are this. All this is the fundamental of his principle given to us, how we live to go there, to preparation for there. And this is the constitution of mostly for us, for now. And that's why last time I said 48, our Father in heaven. The Father, which is real Father. When you baptize, you die, which you were. And when you reborn, now your Father became. And that's the teaching. It's a radical. Exactly, I agree what you said, radical. That's why I said radical. That's the principle.
Just imagine the concept that God is trying to use here. And I'm going to stop here because I really want you guys to go. You just really need to restudy this. You have done in the past, but just for conversational sake going forward, we really need to reread this again and just not have it dumped on us tonight because I'm sure, majority of y'all didn't pre-read this and study it because you know it so well. But when you studied it then, you probably forgot the pace that you went through. I just gave you a complete makeover. That's what Jesus did. He gave you a complete makeover. I'm now going to send you back as advertisement in a world that your makeover should change. The first thing you do when you get a new hairstyle, you get a new shape after losing weight and everything, you do what? You want to go and what? Show it off, right? You go through 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks of training. You want a new wardrobe, and you're going to spend a lot of time in that mirror because you now enjoying some areas of your body that you haven't seen in a long time, or if you have ever seen. And you want to wear clothes that you've seen on other people that look good. Jesus just did the spiritual look good for people. He wants them now to go and show that. Imagine what that will do to the government. Imagine what that will do to the synagogue, the temple. Imagine what that will do to people who've been coming. See, his fame have brought people to him. His healing has brought fame to him. But imagine where those people are going to go back now. Imagine the Syrian population when those people come back healed. Imagine what that person is going to say. Like the man said, I don't know what you're talking about. I know that I was blind, but now I see. Imagine the impact that that's going to do. Like I said, when you get baptized, people can't rob you of your personal story. Now, the newness does wear off. But people can't rob you of your own personal story. You go back and show that you really have changed. See, the miracles were one thing. That was get people to have a mind change. Once you don't have to worry about this here is next. So imagine the people that feel indebted to Jesus. People feel that they owe him something now. Think about that. And they go back now and their mind has changed. Iron sharpens iron. One Jesus cannot be as effective as 12 disciples and 24 disciples and on and on and on. Why? Their mind was changed. After that breakfast on the seashore, they went and told people what they seen and what Jesus had did for them. That's the advertisement that God wants. God wants people to see that the heart was changed because of his grace. And that is radical right now. It's like that when you sit in people's living rooms, when you first talk to somebody about Jesus, it is radical to them to hear that. And then they look at you and see the time that you're investing in their living room and the things that they're doing. That's radical to them. Nobody has ever done that before. And then people want to change, but we still have a lot of baggage. We still have some things in our past that we're still trying to hold on to that we don't change. That's where the rest of God come in. See, the rest of God comes in with the mind change. We get mad at church. We get mad at the minister. We get mad at the content. We get mad at brothers. We get mad at sisters, all because life didn't jump out of the sky when we demanded it. See, and then we tune God off. See, that's not a mind change. Physically, by sight, we want everything when we want it, when our lives fall apart. But it's not a mind thing with God. God is not short-term God. So think about that. Erica?
So when Jesus is speaking to the people in verse 1, it says he went up to the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him, and he opened his mouth and he began teaching them. I think that there's a level of compassion in this, where Jesus, he has healed these people who are marginalized. And having studied this, I look at 21, 27, 33, 43. And in all of those instances, he says, you heard that This reminds me of like when a politician, it's presidential season. So a politician goes to who? Not to other politicians for votes. He goes to the people. This is as if somebody said, you might have heard in DC that we're fighting against immigration, but I'm telling you that. So it's a completely different type of conversation.
It's like your representative coming back to his constituency and
Right.
representing what they're talking about.
And teaching them more accurately, because you don't know what's happening sometimes in the synagogue, or you don't know what was happening in ancient days. But by the time they get this information, right, these are marginalized people. These are people who are on the outskirts of society. These are people who are uneducated. These are women who are not spoken to. These are women who are voiceless. So when he sits down and teaches them, I think that that very act of sitting down shows that this wasn't a stand up Acts chapter 2 rebuke you. This is like, you guys haven't even been taught. And what you were taught, you heard that. And think of the things we hear that's not even a teaching of God. Think of how many things in our own families or church families that you thought was a scripture, and you're like, that's a tale, that's a parable, that's a tradition. All my life I thought I wasn't supposed to do that. And so Jesus is truly sitting among them. He is the man of the people, right? He's the Son of Man and the Son of God in such a real way. And I think we see that here, where he's encouraging them, because after he heals them, these are people who have been mourning. These are people who are hungry. So he has to shift their mindset because they have been persecuted. They've probably been trying to be the peacemakers because remember, they're under oppression. So I think that it's such a moment that really, I think politics, we can only compare it to like when someone comes from the state capital or comes from DC and speaks to the everyday people, because yeah, everyday people gonna do everyday people things. And this is the first time somebody probably came to them to teach them more accurately. And so he has to tell them, this is what you heard, but this is what the truth really is. Because the Pharisees at this point had convoluted so much of what thus said the Lord that people were sinning indirectly because of false teaching. And then on top of all of that, they were people of massive oppression, and they had to have some type of encouragement. And that's what Jesus provides by sitting among them and teaching them.
David?
So I think I see these Beatitudes are the truth come to people. And Jesus gives you 9 examples, 9 Beatitudes, gives you 9 examples of truth. Before he was combating Satan with all these miracles. He showed his dominance over Satan. And now he's presenting blessedness. What is blessedness? That comes from God. Just I've seen this translated the Beatitudes as happy is. But happy, you went to the casino, you're happy. But blessedness, this is how you come this and not that, then your blessedness. So if you're humble and not haughty, it's a blessing from God. But what's another one? If you're mercy. If you show mercy, if someone injures you in some way and you forgive them, it's a blessing. You're blessed as you see God. That's the way that Jesus is telling you to live. So 9 of those examples covered a lot of ground, a lot of issues.
When Jesus put Malchus' ear back on, was he being a peacemaker?
Yes.
When he was slapped by the captain of Caiaphas' army, did he revile against him? Jesus is going to show before he died in physical personage of who God is, that I said it, I meant it, and I did it. Before the church comes, before salvation is even bestowed upon man, God is going to show the Beatitudes. So God is not asking us to do something that he did not show us. But again, we're only human. And a lot of times we just don't get it because it's all about us. And God has to take a second seat. The very nature, thought, mindset of God has to take a second seat because we want what we want. We never think about anybody else. We want what we want, especially when we get our blessing. When we get our blessing, we fix everything up. We good, we groomed, we're fine, we look good, we're gone. We're right back. We're in the game. Hey man, you look good. What happened? It was that bread diet I was on. I was this everything but God. Oh wow, you was down and out, man, with that whole treatment thing, man. You look great. Look at you. Yeah. I got lucky. That's it. Okay, we're gonna start at the salt of the earth next week. Okay, on page 58. So come prepared and ready to discuss that. Okay, we have a couple of prayers.